Governor, I want to ask you about the carrier deal of last week. We said around this table that is great news for more than 1,000 men and women in your state, and I know you helped broker it. But some of the implications of that and some of the things you and the campaign have said after have concerned some conservatives who believe the things you've said are not consistent probably what they think you believe, which is that President Trump and his administration would intervene on a day-by-day basis. They would decide whether or not a private business should move jobs in and try to broker a deal with them. Donald Trump tweeted about a 35% tariff on American companies who produce things and try to bring them back into the United States. Those are not conservatives. Do you really believe in those things?
Well, I believe I believe very much that the American people voted on November 8th for change. And change in our domestic policy and in many ways change in our economic relationships around the world. I mean, the president-elect ran on a commitment to renegotiate NAFTA, to pull out of the TPP agreement and to deal with countries in the Asian Pacific Rim on an individual basis and negotiate trade agreements that put American TPP? Workers and American jobs.
Did you support TPP?
You know, I did, but when I first sat down with President-elect, we talked about this. He pointed to the fact that whether it's NAFTA or some of these other large agreements, when the United States enters into these agreements with multiple countries, accountability is very difficult, and getting out of them is very difficult.
You're a free trader. Paul Ryan's a free trader. Kevin McCarthy's a free trader. Yeah. Obviously, this is far different than what the orthodoxy of our party has been for the past 30 years. How does Donald Trump get some of this legislation through Paul Ryan's House and Mitch McConnell's Senate if they don't believe, like he believes, that you should do carrier deals, that you should put 35% tariffs on China?
Well, first, number one, Donald Trump and I both believe in the free market and we both believe in free trade. But the simple fact is that the United States, under successive administrations, have been negotiating really bad trade deals. And as a candidate, Donald Trump called that out. And the American people agreed with him. I'm from the industrial Midwest. I'll tell you what, we've had one heartbreak after another over the last 30 years where we've seen good paying jobs going south of the border, going overseas. And Donald Trump has really described a two-step process that I think is a reflection of a belief in the principles of the free market. Number one is high taxes, excessive regulations, throw in Obamacare in the last 6 years, has literally been creating a weight on American business that's been driving companies out of this country. I mean, we have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world. Donald Trump and I are committed to working with the Congress to lower that to 15%. To make the American economy more competitive is to recognize the power of the free marketplace, but negotiating trade deals and making sure that we put American jobs and American workers first, and that we put everything on the table, including a recognition that we want to remove, this is what I hear the president-elect saying, he wants to remove the incentive of companies to pull up stakes from places like Indiana and go to Mexico and gain an advantage to be able to build it there and sell it back.
Knowing what I know about you and your background and your belief system, you don't believe that the federal government should intervene with private companies and tell them how to run their businesses.
Sure.
And that's what this is, and that's what a 35% tariff would be. Lowering the corporate tax rate to 15% is something completely different than imposing tariffs on people. So are you for the 35% tariff?
Well, let me go back to the intervening part.
Are you for the tariff, though?
On the carrier thing. Well, I'm for us putting everything on the table in negotiations, in renegotiating NAFTA, and in negotiations with other
including
countries.
The tariff, 35%.
Well, what we don't want to do is for companies to say it costs this much to manufacture it overseas and sell it in the United States, and it costs this much in taxes and regulations and other burdens to manufacture it here in the United States. We've got to put the American worker and American jobs first. But that's a belief in the free market. I mean, I read this morning in the New York Times that about channeling Bernie Sanders or something. That made me laugh out loud early this morning. I mean, Donald Trump and I believe in the free market. We simply believe that high taxes, regulations have been driving jobs out of this country.
But you do understand Bernie Sanders voters,
taxes, roll back regulations.
You understand there were Bernie Sanders voters who voted for Donald Trump, just like there were Barack Obama voters who voted for Donald Trump.
Sure, that's right. But the other piece is on the carrier deal, you talk about intervention. I couldn't be more proud of what our president-elect did in that case. I mean, I got the phone call last February as governor of Indiana, that this company that had been in the state of Indiana since the 1950s was pulling up stakes without any notice and taking thousands of jobs south to Mexico. Frankly, they were joining virtually all of their competitors that were already in Mexico. And I called them up. I had them come in my office. I said, could we put together a pretty standard incentive package that virtually every state does every day of the week to attract and retain jobs? And they said, don't bother. We don't even want to talk about it. We've already made the decision to go. But here, less than a week after the election, with putting together a cabinet, putting together a legislative agenda, assembling a national security team, everything else our president-elect was doing, he picks up the phone and he called the chairman of the parent company, and one American to another very respectfully said, look, I want you to know we're going to cut taxes on businesses and individuals. We're going to roll back the excessive regulations that are driving your company out of this country. We're going to renegotiate NAFTA, and we're going to put American jobs and American workers first. And he simply said, would you be willing to reconsider this decision? And now more than 1,000 Hoosiers have job security in Indiana going forward because of it.
Governor, with regard to your national